Have you ever woken up from a dream so real that for a moment you can't remember where you are? This is a lot like that.
Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam, and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today, we're going to be talking about 20 underrated movies currently included with Prime Video. So Prime Video is one of the more confusing streaming platforms to use, mainly because they have so much paid content available alongside so much of the content that is included. Not only can it be confusing, but their user interface is terrible. They make it really hard to find good stuff. In fact, when I make these videos based on Prime Video, they take the longest to put together because I have to comb through their entire library to find a bunch of good movies, to find 20. But in this video, we've got 20, and they're all underrated movies. Most of these you've probably never even heard of. But enough of that. Let's go ahead and get this list started all the way at the back at number 20 with The Wave, starring Justin Long. Now, this has the appearance of a comedy. In this movie, Justin Long, who is known for his comedic performances, takes a psychedelic drug and goes on a wild trip. You spend most of the movie on said trip with him, and while it does have some levity and some funny moments, it is a fairly heavy movie, but not in a dark sense, more in a introspective sense. He sort of goes on this trip, learns what his life's actually about, and there's a lot of wild stuff that happens too, but the tone with this one's a little bit odd. I was expecting something much funnier. Like I said, it is not that type of a movie, but if the concept interests you at all, or you're a fan of Justin Long's or anything like that, there is enough with The Wave to really grab onto. Just try not to have any expectations going into it. Now, I recommend Scott Adkins movies all the time on this channel, if that's not a familiar name to you. He is a well-known stuntman. He has been in movies for years, but over the last decade or so, he's actually been starring in and producing a lot of his own movies. Now, these are done on lower budgets, and you can tell, but in the genre of low-budget martial arts movies, Scott Adkins is owning the game, meaning while they don't have all the money and resources behind his movies, you can tell there's a lot of people making them that have a real passion, not just for movies, but really for this genre. And I have raved about Avengement. You can catch that on Netflix. I think it's my favorite movie he's done, but the one on Prime Video is called Accident Man. Now, this has a lot in common with movies like The Mechanic. He plays a hitman who makes things look like accidents. There's really nothing new or exciting there. And he beats up a lot of guys really easily as they come at him one at a time, so there's nothing really new there either, but this movie's got a cool vibe to it. It feels almost like a Guy Ritchie movie. It's got some great characters in it. Scott Adkins does a great job, and the stunt choreography is solid. It's way above par. For low-budget movies, they typically use a lot of fast camera movements and you can't quite tell what's happening, but Scott Adkins does everything in camera. There's some great stunt work that you normally don't get in low-budget movies like this. So if you've ever been a fan of this genre, the low-budget martial arts, Scott Adkins movies are some of the best, and Accident Man is easily one of the best on Prime Video right now. As is typically the case with these types of lists, we go in a wide range of genres, and the next one is actually a pretty family-friendly movie called October Sky. Now, this actually stars a fairly young Jake Gyllenhaal. In case you didn't know, he's been in movies since he was a little kid. Now, in this movie, he plays Homer Hickman, who was a real person who was the son of a coal miner who wanted to become a rocket engineer, and it's really well done. It's a coming-of-age thing for the most part. I mean, you're dealing with this teenage boy who's wanting to achieve higher aspirations than his father, and a father who's wanting him to do the same thing, and you get a good look at a couple of things. The space race is depicted in this movie really well, but also what it's like to be a coal miner is depicted in this movie as well. Important stuff, I think, and again, this one is family friendly. It's rated PG. It's from 1999. It's got some years on it, but still just a solid flick. My next pick stars Tom Cruise, but it's one of the most underrated movies he's done this century. It's Valkyrie. Now, this is the story of an assassination attempt on Adolf Hitler. One of his own men, or at least a group of Germans, got together and tried to pull off an assassination. It is odd that Tom Cruise stars in this because he's Tom Cruise. You just see Tom Cruise the whole movie, so I think that actually holds this back a little bit, even though he does a good job. I think had there been someone a little bit less known, this movie may have been even better, or at least more well received, but it does have some good action in it. They put a lot of money into a World War II drama, so there's some fantastic scenes. This movie has just been largely forgotten with time because there have been better efforts made in recent years. Jake Gyllenhaal makes the list again with Love and Other Drugs. This time he's playing opposite Anne Hathaway in what is essentially a romantic comedy. The comedy is fairly light in this movie though. It's a little bit more of a heavy drama, a relationship drama, and as sort of dry and ordinary as that sounds, Love and Other Drugs has a lot of things going for it. Obviously the performances from those two are great, but there are multiple pretty intense sex scenes between the two of them in this movie, and he plays a drug rep in the late 90s, so there's a lot of meat on the bone. There's a lot going on with this movie, and the movie does a good job of balancing all of it. The themes all intermingle quite well. There's some great ancillary characters, so if you don't typically watch this genre, I can tell you this is an exceptional one. However, if you love this genre, this one really stands out as one of the best to have come out over the last 10 years or so. Alright, let's spice things up a bit with a zombie flick, not just any zombie flick, Red Snow, and not just Red Snow, the sequel, Red Snow, Red vs. Dead. Whoa, that's a lot of words, but this is an awesome sequel to an already awesome zombie movie. If you don't know, Dead Snow is a movie about zombie Nazis. It's a lot of fun, it's bloody, it's campy, very tongue-in-cheek, but also really entertaining. The sequel, while the story isn't quite as good, it goes even more over the top in a really fantastic way. Again, with the story being somewhat thin, they make up for it with big, over-the-top stunts, wild stuff that's all mostly in camera. Yeah, there's some digital effects mixed in, but there's a lot of practical effects in this movie, especially for a lower budget horror movie, but this is really a horror comedy. Fans of Shaun of the Dead should definitely check out Dead Snow Red vs. Dead, but if you haven't seen it, also hunt down Dead Snow. It's not available with Prime Video right now, but you can find it bouncing around on various platforms. Alright, my next pick actually comes from director David Gordon Green. Now, if you're not familiar with that name, he directed Pineapple Express, the new Halloween movies, and often steps in and directs The Righteous Gemstones. I love this guy's work, but before he got into those movies, he was doing some low-budget dramas that were excellent, that all punched above their weight. One of my personal favorites is Undertow. Jamie Bell stars as, again, sort of a coming-of-age teenager that lives out on a pig farm. When his uncle, played by Josh Lucas, is released from prison, he comes into the picture. There's an old family fortune of some gold coins in the mix, and some dirty deeds that unfold throughout this. Again, this is a pretty straightforward drama, but you get a lot of thriller elements in it as well. It gets pretty dark, but not overly so. It's a really great sort of backwoods drama. The region that they're in is represented fairly well, and it all feels pretty authentic, especially for this hidden gem thing that I know a lot of people have missed, even though it is from a somewhat prominent director. Alright, now we'll switch things up quite a bit with a big budget spectacle of a movie with big stars like Christian Bale, Gerard Butler, and Matthew McConaughey, and fire-breathing dragons. Yes, all of those things are in the same movie. If you're not familiar, Reign of Fire is a good movie. It just seems like it should be so much better than it is, mainly because of all the ingredients in this soup. Yes, you get fire-breathing dragons. Yes, it is a post-apocalyptic movie. Yes, Matthew McConaughey plays a total badass in it. You get Christian Bale before he was Batman, and Gerard Butler's kind of in there too. This was before 300, before he was famous, but still, it's a badass movie. I think it could have been better had it been rated R. And the story itself ends up being kind of thin. You get thrown into this post-apocalyptic wasteland with these dragons, and you're dealing with these people just fighting to survive. All makes sense, right? But there's not a whole lot happening in terms of story. However, the environment and the world you're in, as gray as it is, it's still really cool. I would have loved to have seen them do more with this universe, but this movie was not very well received despite having great star power, pretty good visual effects for the time when it came out. They still mostly hold up today. Some great action. Again, just the story didn't quite deliver the punch that it should, but still, if you're the least bit interested about anything I've said regarding Reign of Fire, Go into it with little expectations, and I think you will be pleasantly surprised. All right, now we'll jump to another backwoods drama, but this one actually stars Samuel L. Jackson, Justin Timberlake, and Christina Ricci. In Black Snake Moan, Christina Ricci plays a wild, sexed up, I think we can say nymphomaniac. I think that's technically what her character is in this movie. And Samuel L. Jackson plays this old backwoods fellow that chains her to a radiator in order to excise the demons, I guess. Now, as wild as all that sounds, I can tell you the movie does deliver. It is as wild as it sounds, but it also is fairly grounded. You understand why he's doing what he's doing, why he thinks it's going to work, all of that. It's got some great blues music in the mix. It's got a fantastic look to it. And I will say, even though she's a little beat up in this movie, Christina Ricci has never been hotter, I don't think, before or since this movie. And this was before Justin Timberlake was really in movies. He's got a small role, but an important one, and he does a good job. And as heavy as all the themes are, it does have some funny moments. I mean, it is a wild, silly concept, and Samuel L. Jackson is playing kind of a wild character. If you are a fan of his in any kind of way, shape, or form, this movie may not be required viewing, but I would say that his performance in this movie is. If you love him, you gotta see him do this character. And then we will wrap up my bottom 10 on this list with a romantic comedy that is easily one of the best to have come out in the 21st century, 500 Days of Summer. This stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Zooey Deschanel in a very, very good love story. It is a long, epic story about two people meeting and falling in love, and then falling out of love, and it's got a lot going on. The story is quite long, even though the movie isn't, and there's a unique style to 500 Days of Summer. Sometimes people break out in song, sometimes you see things that are going on in his head. It's got kind of a quirky nature to it. Don't get me wrong, this isn't a musical or anything like that, but it's very creative. It sort of oozes creativity, which you normally don't get with romantic comedies. So 500 Days is special because of that. Now, I know it's hard to tell when you're seeing me in a t-shirt from here up, but over the past year or so, I've put on quite a bit of muscle. I know I'm no Schwarzenegger, but I went from being a pretty skinny guy to having some beefier arms than I'm used to, and it's largely because of a high protein diet and quite a lot of exercise. But while eating all that protein, I was having trouble getting all of the green nutrients that I needed, which is where today's sponsor, Athletic Greens, comes in. Just one 8-ounce drink of Athletic Greens every day is absolutely packed with vitamins, minerals, probiotics, antioxidants, and digestive enzymes that are gonna help you get better nutrient absorption. Now, as I said, it's easy for me to eat a lot of protein, but eating all that protein means I'm not also eating a lot of green vegetables, so I'm not benefiting from all the nutrients there. But Athletic Greens is so convenient, I can easily load up on all the nutrients I want from a green diet in about 2 minutes is the time it takes me to pour it, stir it, and drink an 8-ounce AG1. And right now, when my viewers use the link in the video description below, they'll actually get a free year supply of vitamin D3 and K2, which is gonna further support your immune system. And I can't think of a more important time in history to have a strong immune system. That gift also includes 5 travel packs of the Athletic Greens powder. But you're gonna get all this. You're gonna get the big pack of Athletic Greens powder, the jar to keep it in your fridge, the scoop. Everything is nice quality, the bottle to drink out of, and the free gift I already mentioned. Again, when you use the link in the description below, I have been drinking Athletic Greens every day for months now. I absolutely love it. It is a great addition to my diet. Hopefully it is to yours as well. But let's move on and see if we can't find your new favorite movie. So my number 10 pick actually comes from South Korea, and it's one of the darker dramas that I've seen from South Korea in quite a while, and they make some dark stuff. The Wailing is about a small village where people begin getting this mysterious illness, and a homicide detective actually comes in to figure out what's going on. This one goes in some weird directions. It's really dark at times, but the story is still pretty consumable. Now, with foreign language stuff, Prime Video, for some reason, they just do not do a good job. They don't put dubbed versions up, so it limits the audience. You will need to be somewhat comfortable reading subtitles to get through this movie because they do speak quite fast at times, and it can be hard to keep up with. For some reason, I don't know why, but Prime Video just doesn't think it's important. I'll touch on that again later in the video because they did something else silly with one of the movies they put up as well. Now, luckily, even though there's sort of an overload of superhero content being created today, a lot of it is creative and original. Not all of it, or not even most of it, but a lot of it is. There's a lot of people doing new takes and spins on the genre, and one of the better attempts at that, I think, in recent years was Chronicle. Now, this one got plenty of attention back when it came out. However, it's somewhat been forgotten with time, yet it holds up. This is a good movie. Now, it is a PG-13 sci-fi action movie, so it's a little bit neutered, but still, it's the story of these three friends that make a discovery that somehow gives them superpowers. How and what is not really that important. Where this movie goes, though, is in the different directions people might take it. I mean, let's face it, not everybody gifted with superpowers would use them for good. In fact, if I were to wager, I'd say most people probably wouldn't. This movie takes a look at what might happen in that scenario, and the story here is quite good. It's very strong, you get some great visual effects, but I think the story in Chronicle actually triumphs over anything else in it, including the acting, the effects, and all of that. It's quite good. If you never bothered to watch it, trust me, this one's better than you probably imagined. Okay, one of the only true blue comedies on this list is really funny. Luckily, it's got a great cast. It's called GOON, and it's about a hockey enforcer. If you're not familiar with that term, maybe from the South like me, enforcers are the roughest players on the team, to put it lightly. Seann William Scott plays such an enforcer, and it's one of the most interesting characters I've ever seen him do. He's most famous for playing Stifler in American Pie, but here he's playing a very different type of character, and he's doing quite a good job. Not only is he doing a good job, but you also get Liev Schreiber, most famous from Ray Donovan, playing opposite him. He is a fantastic actor, always has been. It's cool to see a really kind of heavy-hitting actor like him play in a comedy movie like this. I mean, it is a sports comedy. If you like sports comedies like Talladega Nights, things like that, the humor in this one's got a unique quality to it, but it is fantastic and does ultimately have a good story as well. There's also a sequel to GOON that I think is almost as good as the original, but if you've never seen it, definitely start with the original. All right, my next pick is actually a Burt Reynolds, I guess we can say classic. However, it's not one of the movies he's most famous for. In White Lightning, he plays a moonshine runner named Gator, and believe it or not, this movie is way better than you might expect. Now, it's in a genre that is bloated with a lot of terrible movies. However, every little element in White Lightning was done really well. For a movie like this, it is shot particularly well. The car chases are all done quite well. They're a little simple. A lot of them are on dirt roads and things, but you can tell that they're driving at speed. I believe the version on Prime Video right now is a TV version, meaning the profanity has been dubbed over. There's not a lot in this movie to begin with, so it's not really distracting, but it is odd. It's something Prime Video does, and I honestly think that they do it by mistake. And then you get Ned Beatty playing this evil sheriff character. He does a fantastic job. I mean, Ned Beatty has always been a great actor, but for such a small role, he's not on screen much. He's really bringing a lot of subtlety and like anger to this sheriff character. He's really acting above sort of the weight of the movie, but it's a good, just classic Burt Reynolds. They actually made a sequel to this called Gator. Archer on the hit show Archer is a big fan of these movies as well, and I can see why. Not only is Burt Reynolds kind of playing an Archer type character, the quality of the final product here is much better than you would expect, again, from this genre. Now, another movie involving moonshining running, and I promise I didn't plan that. The way that I go about organizing these lists, I don't really quite look for things like that, but Lawless has a huge cast with Tom Hardy, Jessica Chastain, Shia LaBeouf, Guy Pearce, and Gary Oldman pops in for a bit. This is a Prohibition-era movie about some moonshine runners trying to escape the clutches of the law. And this is from director John Hillcoat, who had previously directed The Proposition and The Road, two fantastic movies. And while Lawless, I think, is not quite as good of a final product as those other two movies, it still is quite good for such a sort of crowd pleaser type of a movie. Meaning, I don't think Hillcoat or really anybody else involved made really bold choices with the story and the direction of this movie, but it still is a solid movie about some moonshine runners with some great acting and solid production design. My next pick is technically a romantic comedy, but I'm not making a pitch to rom-com fans. I'm making a pitch to fans of Flight of the Conchords, What We Do in the Shadows. Really, if you've loved any New Zealand humor over the years, I highly recommend checking out Eagle vs. Shark.
Sucker. You foolish sucker. Bit of what? Hello? Hello, is Eric there, please?
In this movie, Jermaine Clement from Flight of the Conchords falls in love with a woman, and you get a fairly straightforward story. In fact, this movie has a lot more in common with Napoleon Dynamite than a lot of the other New Zealand things I mentioned. However, the humor in it has got that raw New Zealand sensibility that I don't think you can quite get from anywhere else. And it's a simple, low-budget movie. You can tell by the look of it. It's almost ugly at times in the way that it was shot and the locations that they're in. And it's about these two really quirky, bizarre people falling in love, but it is heartwarming. It's got some nice elements to it, and above all else, it's just really funny, especially if you love that New Zealand brand of humor. All right, now we're in the final four, and because this is an underrated movies list, there are several here that are big budget movies that I think just are not quite looked at the way that they should be. My number 4 pick is Prometheus. Now, this was a highly anticipated prequel to the Alien franchise, and it is that, but it's more and less at the same time. So a lot of audience members were pretty disappointed with this movie because it's not quite an Alien prequel. There's enough there to qualify it as such, but it's also its own thing, and it's at a time where Ridley Scott is really hit and miss. I mean, nothing he's produced in the 21st century has been at the same level as classics like Alien and Blade Runner, movies he's most famous for, but Prometheus is closer than you might remember. Now, there are silly moments in this movie that don't quite make sense logically, but for the most part, Prometheus goes in some really philosophical directions that I think do work upon further inspection. I think they work much better than a lot of things worked in Alien Covenant, so it's in a weird place, but it is beautifully shot. It's got a stunning look to it, and had this stood alone on its own and not been in the shadow of such a good movie like Alien, I think it would have received a lot more respect than it did. All right, my number 3 pick stars Kevin Costner in a thriller from the 80s that was well respected for quite a while, but just time has not remembered it, and it floats around on streaming services probably without anyone really giving a care. And that is No Way Out. Now, it does take a while for No Way Out to kick off, but once it does not stop. In this movie, Kevin Costner plays a naval officer who works in the Pentagon and ends up getting caught up in a murder plot, a pretty elaborate one, and is trying to solve the case while on the grounds of the Pentagon, while also trying to escape people trying to stop him. So if nothing else, you get a great tour of the Pentagon. You get to see what it's like in the Pentagon because they really do a lot of running in this building in this movie. I mean, there's a big portion of this movie that is just running down hallways, but the scenes of tension are fantastic. The thriller elements are all in great balance. You get a great role from Gene Hackman. Everything is wound up tight. It's delivered perfectly. It's just a good, solid thriller that is going to be really hard to beat on Prime Video right now. My next pick is already 12 years old, and it's one of the best, most underrated action movies to have come out in the last 12 years, and one of the few that I really think deserves a sequel, and we will likely never get a sequel to The A-Team. Now, it is important to say I was born in 1984 and never really had access to the A-Team show. It just was never on any of the networks I had access to. I'm familiar with it, I've seen clips, never really watched the show. That said, the A-Team, which came out in 2010, is directed by Joe Carnahan, who has done movies like The Grey, Smokin' Aces, and Boss Level. I love the way that he does action, and I think the A-Team, even though it's PG-13, is one of his best action movies. That said, I normally do talk about how PG-13 action movies feel neutered, they don't have the blood and the violence that you would expect, but for some reason, the A-Team makes it work. It continues to be fun and wild and visceral, and you're never feeling like something's missing. It punches way above its weight. In the realm of movies made after old TV shows, the only thing I can think of that like really stands above this would be Mission Impossible. but that's a very different type of thing. I mean, the A-Team is just good, solid fun from start to finish. It's got a great look to it. All the characters are really fleshed out for a movie. Considering you don't get to spend that much time with them, they all feel really developed as if they were on a TV show. So it's fantastic stuff. Whether you were a fan of the A-Team or not, I highly recommend checking this one out if somehow it's escaped you for 12 years. And then for my number 1 pick, we're gonna go back a whopping 25 years, a quarter of a century, to what I think is the best movie Michael Bay has ever directed, The Rock. Now, I realize this is a big movie. Some of you are like, why is this on an underrated list? Because you love it as much as I do. I can tell you though, that for most people, this movie has not held up with time, or at least they think it hasn't. However, if you go back and rewatch The Rock, there are some weak elements, like the camera just shaking around while Sean Connery pretends to drive. You could tell it doesn't quite work. It worked a lot better in 1996 than it works today, but you can also see a lot of signatures in action movies that didn't exist prior to The Rock. I mean, say what you will about Michael Bay movies, he too had just went in that PG-13 direction, but when he was doing R-rated action movies, he was doing them like no one else, and his style has been copied relentlessly since, which is why I think a lot of people don't have a lot of respect for the way that he films movies. Go back, rewatch The Rock. Not only is it shot really well, not only again are the characters well developed, not only does the story actually work quite well for this type of a movie, but it is incredibly long and epic. That's another thing Michael Bay managed to nail, is he packs a lot of action into a 2-hour time frame. The Rock is no exception, and it's got a great tone to it that is completely consistent all the way through. All the themes work. It really is probably his most successful attempt at storytelling. That's something I think he's not that good at as a director, but The Rock is the exception in that case, among a few others like the original Bad Boys, but The Rock still, I think, stands head and shoulders above everything else Michael Bay has done in his career. There it is, I said it. Let me know if there's any additional movies we should be keeping our eyes out for in the comments below. Who knows, one of your recommendations might make it onto a future video. Thanks again to Athletic Greens for sponsoring another video. I actually do drink this stuff every day. I do love it, so I'm very excited they're a sponsor. Go check out their link in the video description. Supporting sponsors is a great way to support future content here on the channel. You can also go to DarrenVanDam.com. That's DarrenVandam.com, and you'll get additional movie recommendations. I actually recommend signing up for my free newsletter. I'm going to mail you a list of movie recommendations from different platforms every single week. And again, that's totally free, but I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this Prime Video list, and you will see me on the next one.